In September 2023, Sotheby's London held an auction titled Freddie Mercury, A World of His Own. It was the largest public sale of objects associated with Freddie Mercury that had ever taken place, more than 1,500 lots, including costumes, instruments, artwork, handwritten lyrics, personal correspondence, furniture from Garden Lodge. Mary Austin was there. She had been the keeper of these things for 32 years. She had not sold a single significant item in that time. And then in 2023, she did. The auction rooms filled with the people who had come to buy and to be present at the specific occasion of these objects being released into the world after 32 years. Mary Austin was among them. She was there when the first lot was called. And at some point before the auction was over, before the 1,500 lots had been disposed of, before the last object had found its new owner, she left. The people present when she left have described the moment. They have said she seemed to need to be there, and they have said she seemed to need to leave. Both things were true. This video is about both things. Mary Austin was born on the 6th of November, 1951, in Fulham, London. She met Freddie Mercury in 1969, when she was 17 and he was 22. They were together as a couple from 1969 until the mid-1970s, when the nature of the relationship changed, but the relationship itself did not end. Freddie Mercury spoke about her in the careful terms he used for things that were most significant to him. He said she was his only real friend. He said he had many people around him and that he trusted her above all of them. He said that all his other friends came after I was famous and that she was different because she had known him before. He left her Garden Lodge and the estate and the majority of the things inside it. He left it not as a transaction, but as a trust, the form of leaving that says, I know what you will do with this. I trust you to do it. And Mary Austin spent 32 years doing it. Garden Lodge 1. Logan Place, Kensington became, after his death in November 1991, Mary Austin's home and the specific physical space in which his memory was maintained. She continued to live there. The rooms continued to hold the objects that had been in them when he was alive, the art, the Japanese pieces and the Art Nouveau and the porcelain, the furniture, the costumes, the instruments, the handwritten lyric sheets and personal correspondence, and the accumulated material of a life lived at the intersection of the extraordinary public and the intensely private. None of it was sold. The world's interest in these objects grew in the decades after his death, the interest not diminishing, but increasing as the scope of what he had made became clearer. The answer was consistently no. The specific, quiet no of someone entrusted with something who does not need to explain the trust. 32 years. The rooms held what they had held. The objects stayed where they were. The world continued to ask, and the answer continued to be no. Not defiantly no. Not institutionally no. Simply no, the specific, quiet no of someone who has been entrusted with something and who does not need to explain the trust or its terms. Mary Austin lived in Garden Lodge for 32 years, with what Freddie Mercury had left her. She was 69 years old when the 32 years ended. She had been 17 when they first met. More than half of her life had been spent in a specific form of fidelity to the person she had met when she was 17. And in 2023, she decided to sell. The reasons that Mary Austin chose 2023 to bring the objects of Garden Lodge to auction are not something she has fully explained. Sotheby spoke of her desire to share the objects with the world, to allow the people who had loved Freddie Mercury's music to have access to the things that had been in the rooms of his private world. This is the formal explanation. It is accurate as far as it goes, but it does not explain the timing, why 32 years, why 2023. What the timing suggests is something about readiness, the specific form of readiness that is not a decision made on a particular day, but the arrival at a point where the decision becomes possible, where the keeping has been complete and the release can happen without the release being a loss. Mary Austin was 71 years old in 2023. She had known Freddie Mercury since she was 17. She had kept what he left her for longer than the time from their meeting to his death. And in 2023, she let it go. The objects that came to auction in September 2023 were, by the accounts of the Sotheby's specialists who cataloged them, Extraordinary in the specific way that the life they came from was extraordinary. The costumes from Queen's tours, the Nebworth jacket, the costumes that the world had watched and that Garden Lodge had held in their original form. The artwork, Japanese ceramics and prints, Art Nouveau pieces, early British paintings, the collection of a sophisticated and deeply knowledgeable collector. The handwritten lyrics, the physical objects of the creative process, the sheets on which the songs had been written before they became the recordings the world knew. The instruments, the personal correspondence, the furniture from the rooms of Garden Lodge itself, and the piano on which Bohemian Rhapsody had been composed, on which Somebody to Love had taken shape, which had stood in the drawing room for 32 years after his death. These objects had been in those rooms, and in 2023, they left. On the day of the auction, Mary Austin was present in the Sotheby's rooms. The accounts of the people who were there describe her presence in terms that carry the specific weight of understanding what her being there meant. She was not there in a public capacity. She was not there to give statements or manage the presentation of the sale. She was there in the specific private capacity of someone who has been the keeper of things and who has come to be present at the moment when the keeping ends. The auction room was full. The objects, the costumes, and the artwork, and the instruments, and the handwritten lyrics were displayed in the specific way of a major Sotheby's sale, each in the process of moving from the room where it had been to the new rooms of the people who would buy it. And Mary Austin was there, among the buyers and the specialists and the press. She was there when the first lot was called. She was there when the first lot was called. The auction had begun. The objects that had been in the rooms of Garden Lodge for 32 years were now in the room with the people who had come to bid on them. The specific process of the auction, the calling of the lot, the bidding, the hammer falling, the transfer of ownership was happening around her. 32 years of keeping, and now the moment when the keeping was over and what had been kept was being given to the world. She had been the keeper. She was in the room. The first lot was called, and at some point that day, before the auction was over, she got up and left. The accounts of the people who were present when Mary Austin left described the moment in the careful terms of people who understood what they were witnessing. She did not leave because something had gone wrong. She left in the specific way that people leave things when the being there has been accomplished, and the continuing to be there has become something different when the need that brought them has been met and what remains cannot be met by staying. She had needed to be there. She had been there. The first lots had been called. The objects of Freddie Mercury's life had been released into the process that would carry them into the world. The keeping had begun to end. And Mary Austin, who had been the keeper, had witnessed the beginning of the ending. And then she had left. Not because the ending was too much, but because the beginning of the ending was enough. The rest would happen without her needing to be there for it. The two moments this video is built around Mary Austin's arrival at the auction room and her departure before it was over are not dramatic moments in any conventional sense. They are quiet moments. What makes them significant is not anything visible about them. What makes them significant is what they contain. The arrival contained 32 years of keeping the specific form of fidelity expressed not in words or public acts, but in the daily practice of maintaining the space and the objects that person had inhabited and loved. The departure contained the understanding available only to someone who has been the keeper of a private world and who has finally allowed it to be public, the understanding that the being there for the beginning is what she needed, and that the rest, the 1,500 lots and the hammer and the new owners, was not what required her presence. She had been there for the beginning of the end. That was the task. She completed it and left. Freddie Mercury's decision to leave Garden Lodge and the majority of his estate to Mary Austin was not a surprise to the people who knew them both. It was not the relationship of a former romantic partner being provided for. It was the relationship of the person Freddie Mercury trusted most completely, the person who had known him before the world knew him, who had remained when other relationships had changed or ended or become complicated by the pressures of extraordinary fame, who had given him the form of presence and care that does not depend on what someone is, but on who they are. He said, "All my other friends came after I was famous. The specific weight of that sentence is the explanation of why he left her, what he left her. The keeping was the answer to the leaving. He left her everything that was most private and most real because she was the person for whom the private and the real were what mattered. And she kept it. He left her everything that was most private and most real. She kept it for 32 years. And in 2023, she came to the auction room and watched the beginning of its release into the world. And then she left before the release was complete. The arrival and the departure together say everything that can be said about 32 years of keeping and 1 day of letting go. She did not need to see the end. She needed to see the beginning, the moment when the keeping became the giving, when the private became public, when the objects of his private world began their journey into the new rooms of the people who would now hold them. That moment she was there for. That moment she witnessed. And then she left the way you leave when the thing you came to do has been done, and what remains is someone else's work. Among the objects in the September 2023 auction, the most discussed was the piano, a Bechstein Grand that Freddie Mercury had used to compose at Garden Lodge, the instrument on which Bohemian Rhapsody had been worked through and Somebody to Love had taken its shape. The piano had stood in the drawing room for 32 years after his death. It had not been moved. It had not been loaned or exhibited or made available for any public occasion. It was one of the objects Mary Austin had maintained in the specific form of maintenance that is simply leaving things where they are, because moving them would be changing something that does not need to be changed. The piano sold for approximately £1.7 million. It was bought by a buyer who chose to remain anonymous. It left Garden Lodge for the first time since Freddie Mercury had been alive, and the room where it had stood became, for the first time, a room without the piano. Garden Lodge, the property itself, 1 Logan Place, was not part of the September 2023 auction. Mary Austin continued to own the property. The sale was of the objects inside the rooms, not of the rooms themselves. But the relationship between the property and the objects is part of what makes the 2023 sale significant. The objects in the rooms had been in the same relationship for 32 years, and the sale changed that relationship permanently. Garden Lodge is still standing. The fans who gather at the wall outside, who have gathered since the morning of the 25th of November, 1991, who have left flowers and written their grief and replaced it when it was cleaned and written it again, continue to gather. But the rooms inside are different now. The piano is gone. The costumes are in their new owner's possession. The handwritten lyrics are in glass cases around the world. The rooms that Mary Austin kept for 32 years are not the same rooms they were before the sale. The rooms are not the same rooms. The piano is gone. The costumes are gone. The handwritten lyrics are in glass cases around the world. Mary Austin was there for the beginning of this, there when the first lot was called and the keeping began to become the giving. And then she left. The wall outside still has the flowers and the photographs. The fans still come, but the rooms inside are different. And the woman who kept them for 32 years was in the room when the difference began. She was there for the beginning. She did not need to be there for the end. Mary Austin never sold anything from Garden Lodge for 32 years. Then in September 2023, she did. And on the day of the sale, she was present in the Sotheby's auction rooms when the first lot was called. And at some point before the auction was over, she got up and walked out and did not come back. They have said she seemed to need to be there, and she seemed to need to leave. Both things were true simultaneously. She needed to be there because the keeper had to witness the beginning of the end of the keeping. She needed to leave because the rest was not something that required her presence. She had done her part, 32 years of it. And then she had left the way Freddie Mercury had left things he loved, without ceremony, without asking anyone in the room to mark the moment. He left a party at its peak. She left an auction before it was over. Both of them knowing without saying it that the best time to leave is before the moment has passed.